Victoria had always prided herself on having the perfect marriage. 7 years with Robert, a successful architect with charming dimples and a laugh that could fill a room. They lived in a stunning modernist home he'd designed himself, hosted dinner parties that the neighbors envied, and presented themselves as the couple everyone wanted to be. But perfection, she was learning, was just a carefully constructed illusion. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening in March. Robert came home late, claiming a client meeting had run over. His shirt collar was slightly askew, and there was a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume, something floral and young. Victoria noticed immediately. She always noticed. But she said nothing, just smiled and reheated his dinner. That night, lying in bed beside him, she felt the distance that had been growing for months. Robert had become distant, distracted. He'd always find reasons to work late, to take business trips that seemed increasingly unnecessary for an architect. When they were intimate, it felt mechanical, obligatory. The spark they once had, that electric connection that had made her fall for him in the first place, had dimmed to an ember. She could have confronted him then. Instead, she did what she'd always done, she observed. She paid attention to every detail, every inconsistency, every lie wrapped in a businessman's excuse. Victoria had learned long ago that knowledge was power, and she wanted all of it before making her move. His phone became her silent obsession. Not because she wanted to invade his privacy, but because she needed proof of what she already suspected. She watched him guard it carefully, taking calls in his study with the door locked, texting with one hand while holding their wine glass with the other at dinner. Once, she caught a glimpse of a contact name, A. Just a single letter. It was almost insulting in its carelessness. The breaking point came when she found the credit card statement. A hotel in the city where Robert claimed to have business meetings. The Riverside Inn. Booked for 3 consecutive Thursdays. She checked their calendar. Those were the nights he said he was in meetings with important clients. The irony wasn't lost on her. He was meeting someone important, just not the way he'd implied. Victoria's heart should have shattered. Instead, it hardened. She began her own investigation, not with anger but with surgical precision. She hired a private investigator, discreetly, through a lawyer she trusted. She opened a separate bank account and started moving money into it, small amounts that wouldn't raise suspicion. She documented everything, dates, times, locations. She took screenshots of his calendar, his text messages, his credit card statements. She was building a case, not just for divorce, but for leverage. 2 weeks into her investigation, she sat in a coffee shop across from the private investigator. He slid her a manila envelope. Inside were photographs. Robert, unmistakably Robert, walking hand in hand with a woman who looked no older than 25. She had red hair and wore the kind of effortless youth that Victoria could never reclaim, no matter how many Pilates classes she attended or how much she spent on skin care. But it was Robert's face that cut deepest. In those photographs, he was smiling in a way Victoria hadn't seen in years. He looked alive. He looked happy. And he was looking at someone else. Victoria carefully placed the photographs back in the envelope. She took a slow sip of her coffee and smiled. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She simply planned. Because unlike Robert, Victoria understood that the best revenge wasn't screaming or confrontation. The best revenge was turning the tables when he least expected it. Her name was Amber, and she worked at Robert's architecture firm as a junior designer. Victoria found her on social media, Instagram full of selfies, gym photos, and aspirational quotes about finding real love and soulmates. How poetic. How delusional. Amber had no idea that the man she was sleeping with had a wife at home, meticulously gathering evidence of his betrayal. Victoria didn't feel jealousy toward Amber, not really. She felt something closer to pity. Robert was using her, that much was obvious. The woman was young, impressionable, and clearly starved for attention from a successful man who showed her affection she probably mistook for genuine love. It was almost too easy to see the manipulation in his every move. But Victoria's real interest wasn't in Amber. It was in what Amber represented: proof. Tangible, undeniable proof that Robert had destroyed their marriage for a fling with someone who could barely order a wine without asking for recommendations. The investigator had done his work well. Amber's apartment was in a modest building downtown, paid for, Victoria discovered, by Robert himself. There were regular deposits into her account from his secondary business card, the one he claimed was for miscellaneous office expenses. The irony was almost beautiful. He was literally paying for his own infidelity, leaving a paper trail so clear that even a fool could follow it. Victoria began planning with meticulous detail. She scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney, but not just any attorney. She hired the most ruthless family law specialist in the city, a woman named Patricia Mercer who had a reputation for taking men to the cleaners. Victoria brought her the folder of evidence: photographs, bank statements, hotel records, text message screenshots, credit card bills. Patricia smiled as she reviewed the materials, that predatory smile of a lawyer who had just been handed a winning case on a silver platter. "This is excellent work," Patricia said, arranging the documents in precise order. "Your husband has been incredibly careless. You'll have no trouble establishing infidelity, and these financial records will make the asset division very much in your favor. The fact that he's been using marital assets to support his mistress? That's going to cost him significantly." But Victoria wasn't interested in just taking his money. She wanted something else, something more satisfying. She wanted him to feel the same humiliation she'd been quietly enduring. She wanted the carefully constructed facade of his perfect life to crumble in the same way her trust had crumbled. So she made a phone call. One simple phone call to Robert's firm, requesting an appointment with the managing partner. She had something important to discuss, she explained, something that would interest them greatly regarding one of their junior employees and her relationship with a senior architect. The conversation took 15 minutes. By the end, Victoria had given them enough information to make them deeply concerned about potential liability issues, workplace relationships, and the ethical implications of Robert's behavior. She didn't accuse anyone directly. She simply asked questions. "Do you have policies about senior architects dating junior staff members? Are there concerns about power dynamics? Has HR been informed about any relationships that might constitute conflicts of interest?" The seed was planted. Meanwhile, she sent an anonymous email to Amber's parents. She didn't fabricate anything, she simply shared the facts with carefully selected attachments. She wrote about how their daughter was involved in an affair with a married man, how this married man was significantly older and in a position of professional authority, how she felt they deserved to know that their daughter was being manipulated by someone with far more experience in the art of deception. Amber's response was immediate and panicked. She called Robert 17 times in a single day. Victoria watched as Robert's perfect composure finally cracked, as he realized that the secret he'd been so careful to hide was unraveling. His phone became his constant companion, his face grew pale, and his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. Victoria watched it all happen. She waited. She prepared. And she smiled. The explosion came on a Friday morning, 4 months after Victoria first found the hotel receipt. Robert arrived home looking disheveled, his tie loosened, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and panic. He'd been called into the managing partner's office that morning. Questions had been asked. Not accusations, just questions. But the implications were clear: his conduct was under review. There would be an investigation. His professional reputation was hanging by a thread. Victoria was in the kitchen, sipping her morning coffee, when he stormed in. She'd known this moment was coming. She'd been preparing for it emotionally for months now. "Do you know what's happening at work?" he demanded, his voice shaking with a fury she'd rarely seen directed at her. "Someone has told them about Amber." HR is asking questions. My partners are looking at me like I'm some kind of predator. The senior clients are requesting different architects. Do you understand what you're doing to me? Victoria looked up slowly, her expression perfectly calm. I haven't told anyone anything, Robert. Don't lie to me. He slammed his hand on the counter. Someone sent my parents-in-law an email about me and Amber. Someone has been documenting everything. It has to be you. Who else would do this? This was the moment. This was when she could let him continue to spiral in confusion, or she could give him the truth. Victoria chose truth. Sit down, she said quietly. I don't want to sit down. I want you to tell me what you've done. I said, sit down. Something in her tone made him obey. He collapsed into the kitchen chair, looking suddenly smaller, weaker than she'd ever seen him. Victoria pulled out her phone and placed it on the table between them. On the screen was a folder labeled Evidence. She watched his face as she opened it, revealing the photographs of him and Amber, the bank statements, the hotel records, the text messages. How long? He whispered. Since March. I found the hotel receipt in your desk drawer. You've been, what? Investigating me? Hiring private investigators? Yes. For how long? 4 months. Robert's hands trembled as he stared at the phone. Why didn't you just ask me? Why didn't you confront me about this? Victoria leaned back in her chair. Because I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I decided what to do. And because, Robert, I needed to protect myself. I needed proof. I needed to ensure that when I leave you, I can do it on my terms, with every advantage. Leave me? His voice cracked. You're leaving me? But I didn't. Didn't what? Didn't think I'd find out? Didn't think there would be consequences? You've been sleeping with Amber for 6 months. You've been lying to me every single day. You've been using our money to pay for her apartment, her dinners, her gifts. You kissed her with the same lips you kiss me. You held her the way you used to hold me. As she spoke, Victoria felt something shift inside her. The anger she'd been suppressing for so long began to surface, but she remained composed, controlled. I deserve better than this, Robert. I deserve a partner who respects me, who cherishes me, who doesn't humiliate me with someone half my age. Robert's face crumpled. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't. Amber, she made me feel alive again. I felt invisible to you. You were always so busy, so focused on your charity work and your friends and... So this is my fault? Victoria's voice remained eerily calm. You cheated on me and lied to me because I was busy? You committed emotional treason because you wanted to feel alive? No, I just mean that we'd grown distant. I thought. You thought I wouldn't find out, Victoria interrupted. That was the only thing you thought, Robert. And now you're facing the consequences of that calculation. She pushed a document across the table. It was the divorce petition, already signed and notarized. Patricia Mercer is my attorney. She's prepared a generous settlement offer based on our marital assets and your documented infidelity. The hotel stays with me. The investment accounts are being divided as outlined in that document. And given that you've been using company resources and possibly abusing your position of authority over a junior employee, your firm is already considering their own legal actions. Robert stared at the document, his eyes widening as he scanned the numbers. You're taking everything. I'm taking what's mine, Victoria corrected. Everything else is being divided according to the law. You can contest it if you want, but I have photographs, financial records, and hotel receipts. My attorney is confident that no judge will look favorably upon your position. He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. But it wasn't remorse for what he'd done to her. It was remorse for being caught. "I still love you," he said weakly. 2 weeks later, Victoria sat in Patricia Mercer's office, signing the final divorce papers. The settlement had gone exactly as planned. She would keep the house, most of their investments, and a substantial monthly alimony payment. Robert's firm had launched their own investigation into his conduct with Amber, and the results had been damaging. He'd been asked to resign before they could be forced to fire him for ethical violations. The golden architect with the perfect life was now facing unemployment and a tarnished reputation. But there was something else that had emerged during the discovery process, something that surprised even Victoria. "There's something you should know," Patricia said, sliding a document across her desk. It was a bank account statement, one that had come up during the financial discovery phase of the divorce. An account in Amber's name, funded with substantial deposits over the past 2 years. Not just the obvious ones from Robert's secondary card, but older deposits as well. Dating back before Robert even met Amber. "This is strange," Patricia continued, pointing to the pattern of deposits. "These transfers are from a different source. They're consistent, regular, and quite substantial. I had one of my investigators look into it." Victoria frowned as she read the report. The money was coming from an account linked to her own father. She read the investigator's findings, her heart beginning to race. According to the financial records and bank statements, her father had been funding Amber's lifestyle for over 2 years. Not as a direct transfer, but through a carefully hidden network of accounts and shell companies. "Why would my father?" Victoria began, but then she stopped. A terrible realization was dawning on her. Patricia leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "I spoke with your father yesterday. He's retained his own counsel, but he did agree to have a conversation with me about these accounts." "Victoria, it appears that your father hired Amber." "Not directly, but through an intermediary. He wanted to, let's call it, test your marriage." The room seemed to spin. "What?" "Your father was concerned about your marriage," Patricia explained carefully. "He felt that Robert was taking you for granted, that he wasn't appreciating you. He believed that introducing an external threat, someone young, attractive, and willing, would either force Robert to value you more, or would give you grounds to leave if he couldn't stay faithful. It was, frankly, an extremely unorthodox and unethical approach, but it appears your father has had some experience with such strategies." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. Her own father? The man she'd always looked up to, the man who'd taught her about dignity and self-respect? He'd orchestrated her husband's infidelity? "There's more," Patricia said, her voice gentler now. "Your father also wanted me to inform you that he's made a substantial donation to your account, call it compensation for the emotional distress this situation has caused. He's also ensured that Amber has been relocated out of the city with a generous severance package to keep quiet about the arrangement. Your father is, well, he's quite wealthy and quite thorough when it comes to cleaning up his messes." Victoria left the office in a daze. She drove aimlessly through the city, trying to process what she'd just learned. The carefully constructed narrative she'd built in her mind, Victoria the wronged wife, clever and strategic, suddenly felt less like a triumph and more like a pawn's move in a larger game. That evening, she called her father. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been expecting her call. "Hello, darling," he said warmly. "I imagine Patricia told you about my involvement? How could you?" Victoria asked, her voice shaking with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite separate. "How could you do something like that to me? How could you manipulate my life, my marriage, my—" "I protected you," her father interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "I gave you exactly what you needed, an exit strategy from a marriage that was failing. Yes, the method was unconventional, but the result was exactly what you needed. You're free now. You're financially secure. And you proved yourself to be far more intelligent and capable than your husband ever was." I didn't need you to stage manage my life, Victoria said, tears finally beginning to fall. I'm an adult. I should have been able to make my own decisions. And you did, her father replied. You investigated. You gathered evidence. You took action. All you did was what I knew you were capable of doing. I simply provided you with the catalyst. What you did with that catalyst was entirely your choice, Victoria. After she hung up, Victoria sat in her beautiful house, the house that Robert had designed, the house that her father had funded through one of his companies, and wondered who had acted to. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Victoria received a letter. It was from Robert, forwarded through Patricia's office. She almost threw it away unopened, but something made her pause. She opened it slowly, her hand steady but her heart uncertain. The letter was handwritten, on expensive paper. The irony of Robert spending money on something so trivial wasn't lost on her. He wrote about the fallout from his resignation, about how difficult it had been to find new work in architecture when his name was now associated with scandal. He wrote about moving into a small apartment, about seeing a therapist, about finally understanding the magnitude of his betrayal. But most importantly, he wrote about Amber. Amber had broken up with him within days of his professional collapse. She'd returned to her hometown, and from what Robert could gather, she'd used her severance package to start her own design business. She was doing well, apparently. Better than Robert himself. But the final paragraph was what struck Victoria most deeply. I want you to know that I've spent the last few months trying to understand how we got here. Not as a means of absolving myself of blame, I don't deserve absolution. But because I need to understand what happened to us. The truth is, I think we killed something beautiful between us long before I ever met Amber. We stopped talking. We stopped fighting for each other. And instead of working on our marriage, instead of being honest about how unhappy we both were, I looked for an escape. I chose infidelity as my cowardly way out. And you chose perfect revenge as your way out. We both betrayed each other, Victoria. Mine was obvious. Yours was just more elegant. I hope, eventually, you can forgive yourself for what you did, not for my sake, but for yours. Victoria read the letter 3 times. Then she burned it. But his words stayed with her. She'd been so focused on Robert's betrayal that she'd never examined her own. Her months of investigation, her careful manipulation of his firm, her anonymous emails to Amber's parents, these weren't acts of justice. They were acts of vengeance, dressed up in the language of self-protection. That realization led Victoria to her own therapist, a woman named Dr. Eleanor Chin who specialized in marriage dissolution and emotional trauma. Over the next several months, Victoria began the difficult work of examining her own role in the marriage's failure. She'd been controlling, emotionally withdrawn, more focused on image than intimacy. She'd prioritized her position in society over genuine connection with her husband. She'd built walls so high that Robert couldn't scale them, and instead of helping him climb over them, she'd watched him seek connection elsewhere. None of this absolved Robert of his infidelity. But it gave Victoria a more honest picture of herself. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Victoria received another letter, this one in an elegant envelope with her father's monogram. He was inviting her to lunch at his club, their usual spot, the place where he'd taken her since childhood to celebrate achievements. She almost didn't go. But she did. Her father was waiting at their usual table, looking every bit the powerful man he was, silver-haired, distinguished, commanding attention without saying a word. He stood to kiss her cheek when she arrived, and they settled into the comfortable silence of 2 people who'd known each other their entire lives. Patricia told me you've been seeing a therapist, he said after their appetizers arrived. Did she also tell you that I'm working through some complicated feelings about your involvement in my marriage? Victoria replied, her tone neutral. She did. He took a sip of his wine. I owe you an apology, Victoria. Not for protecting you, but for not being honest about my methods. I manipulated a situation without your consent, and no matter how good my intentions were, that was wrong. Victoria felt something shift in her chest. She hadn't expected this from her father. In all her life, she'd rarely heard him admit fault for anything. "Why did you really do it?" she asked. "Because I saw you becoming your mother," he said quietly. Quiet, controlled, disappearing into a marriage that was draining your light. And I couldn't watch that happen to you. So yes, I orchestrated Amber's appearance. I wanted to force you to choose yourself, to choose strength, to choose honesty instead of performance. By lying to me? Yes. And I was wrong to do that. You're an adult, and you deserve to make that choice freely, without my manipulation. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Victoria said, "I think I would have left him eventually anyway. I think I always knew something was wrong. I just needed to feel like I had control over the ending." Her father reached across the table and took her hand. "That's what I see when I look at you now, control. Real control.